Present.
And Commissioner Torres.
Present.
Thank you. Roll call is complete.
Thank you. And we have a full quorum, so none of the alternates will be voting tonight. All right. Can we get a motion to approve the preceding meeting minutes from June 8th? Commissioner McConnell.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Mayo. And can we get a roll call on the vote?
Yes, Chair Boschert.
Aye.
Chair Boschert is in favor. Vice Chair McConnell.
Aye.
Vice Chair McConnell is in favor. Commissioner Carpenter.
Aye.
Commissioner Carpenter is in favor. Commissioner Calling.
Aye.
Commissioner Calling is in favor. Commissioner Dunn.
Yes.
Commissioner Dunn is in favor. Commissioner Tomacek.
Aye.
Commissioner Tomacek is in favor. Commissioner Mayo.
Aye.
Commissioner Mayo is in favor. Roll call vote is complete.
Thank you. And the minutes for June 8th pass unanimously. I need to mention that due to COVID-19, comments were accepted electronically and via voicemail and were delivered to the Planning Commission and posted to the public agenda packet online prior to the meeting. Anyone who signed up in advance will be able to speak at the public testimony portion of this hearing. Jennifer, did we get any people who signed up to speak?
Not at this time, Chair Boschert.
Thank you. There are two items on this evening's agenda. 3A, Transportation and Mobility Plan presentation only. And 3B, Public Hearing and Action of the Preliminary Development Plan and Official Development Plan for Huron Plaza Subdivision for Boulder Creek, to be known as the Knolls at Big Dry Creek. I believe we have Christina to present tonight. Go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairperson Boschert and Planning Commission. My name is Heath Klein. I am the City of Westminster Transportation Engineer, and we are pleased to bring you tonight an overview of the hard work that's been going on for over a year and a half now and nearing completion on the city's first complete transportation and mobility plan. So I'm not going to take a lot of the information that you will be hearing from Christina, but it is the first comprehensive plan that the city has done. We've typically had kind of offshoots and separate plans, but we are deciding to pull them all together and very excited to let you know about this tonight. And with that, here is Christina Evanoff.
Thank you, Heath. Good evening. I'm Christina Evanoff. I'm the Transportation Mobility Planner and Project Manager for the development of the Transportation and Mobility Plan. And thank you, Planning Commissioners and meeting attendees, for your time tonight to receive a presentation on an overview of the plan that Heath had mentioned previously, prior to its release for community input next week, which I'll talk about here in the presentation. So for tonight's presentation, I will begin with a brief background on the purpose and development of the Transportation and Mobility Plan, with the majority of the presentation focusing on the content of the plan. I will conclude the presentation with an overview of the remaining next steps to complete the plan development process. And then Heath and I will be available after to answer any of your questions you may have after the presentation. Because I cover the plan material fairly briefly tonight, I've added a reference to each chapter of the plan in the lower right-hand corner of most slides. And again, the plan will be available next week, but it also was shown to council last night at the study session. So if you want to see a sneak peek of the plan, it's available, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. So these chapters I'm referencing are in those plan, and look in the lower right-hand slide if you want to dig a little deeper on some of the topics I talk about. Next slide, please. So before I begin about what the Transportation Mobility Plan is and the content of it, I first wanted to start with a brief recap about why we do a Transportation Mobility Plan and why is it needed and why it was developed. So Westminster, as well as cities across the region and even across the nation, have experienced changes in population growth, demographics, the economy, and technology. And communities have also evolved over the years in how people want to travel to their destinations. And there has been an increased emphasis in transportation safety, community health, and economic vitality, as well as a shift from vehicle-centric to more people-centric street planning and design. Cities have recognized it has become increasingly important to understand the current and future transportation needs of our communities and to develop and refine community plans, policies, and programs to address these needs. Transportation improvements in Westminster have been guided by different types of projects and the adopted bicycle and roadway master plans. And Westminster has had a history of street networks that focus on moving vehicles instead of providing a more connected system that looks at the movement of people in all modes of transportation. The city recognized that it is now time to evaluate and identify the current and future multimodal transportation and mobility needs of Westminster's residents, commuters, and visitors. And these needs will now be addressed through the implementation of Westminster's first comprehensive multimodal transportation master plan. Next slide. Development of the Transportation Mobility Plan began in mid-2019 in coordination with the Westminster Forward Planning Initiative, which includes plans such as the Comprehensive Plan Update, as well as with other local and regional plans and projects. The development of the plan was informed by analysis, application of industry best practices, and staff input. The plan was also most importantly informed by community and stakeholder input at key milestones, as I will discuss later in this presentation. So Westminster's Transportation Mobility Plan is a 20-year plan establishing Westminster's transportation vision supported by 7 goals. The plan identifies near-term and long-term strategic projects as well as programmatic and policy actions. The plan will also include multimodal transportation safety and connectivity improvements along corridors in Westminster, as well as guiding actions to prepare for the integration of evolving technology and advancements in community and environmental health. Westminster's new transportation plan will supersede and replace the existing adopted bicycle master plan, the adopted comprehensive roadway plan, and the mobility action plan. Next slide. The Transportation Mobility Plan is comprised of an executive summary, 11 chapters, and 4 appendices shown in the blue boxes here on this slide. And I'm going to keep my presentation fairly brief here and not dive into every chapter, but there are a few key chapters I'll dive into in the next few slides here. After the plan is finalized, an implementation plan and other supportive technical documents and toolkits, as shown in the purple box, will be developed and used to prioritize projects and to guide the implementation of elements such as transit improvements, street crossing improvements, and development of transportation programs. Next slide. To ensure the Transportation Mobility Plan meets the current and future needs of the community, outreach and engagement was conducted to gather community and stakeholder input throughout the plan development process at key milestones. The project team used a variety of in-person, pre-COVID pandemic, and online engagement tools to collect community comments. In addition to the community input, the development of the plan was also informed by input from the community advisory team comprised of 28 individuals representing various community interests and organizations. Commissioner Dunn served as the Planning Commission representative on this community team. The community advisory team convened virtually 3 times during the plan development process to provide input. A number of key themes emerged from community engagement, including the community's desire to have a more connected, safe, and reliable multimodal transportation system for Westminster. Many indicated the importance of Westminster having improved transit service and bus stop amenities, as well as more bicycle lanes that are connected and safe. Community input also reflected the importance of maintaining streets and improving street operations to reduce congestion and delay. Safety was expressed often, especially with concerns around speeding and the safety for each mode of transportation, especially pedestrians and bicyclists. The input received is reflected through the plan and the plan recommendations, and the plan will be updated as needed after community input is received on the draft plan this summer. Now, I always like to note about community input that it just doesn't end with completing the development of this plan. Community and stakeholder input will also continue to be important during the implementation of transportation and projects and programs. Next slide, please. The Transportation and Mobility Plan Vision and 7 goals, as shown on this slide and discussed in Chapter 3 of the plan, were created through community and staff input to ensure the plan and implementation of the plan's actions and projects meet Westminster's transportation and mobility needs, as well as supporting other local and regional goals. The goals were used to help guide the development of the strategies, actions, and projects in the plan. And the goals will also continue to be used to guide the prioritization and implementation of the plan and identification of resources, including funding, such as identified now in the strategic plan. And the goals will also be used to track the progress of the plan implementation. One item I'd especially like to highlight on this slide is input from the community, and the community advisory team indicated the importance of including equity more in the plan. Therefore, the plan vision and goals and portions of the plan were revised, and as shown here in the blue underline in the starred areas, the vision and goals were revised to show more about equity. It will also be important for equity to be integrated in transportation projects and in the development of implementation of additional transportation policies and programs. Next slide. Addressing Westminster's transportation and mobility needs includes identifying near-term and future multimodal transportation capital improvements, investments, and studies along key corridors and at intersections throughout the city. To develop the final improvements and investments to carry forward in the plan, improvement concepts were identified and evaluated for vehicles, transit, bicycles, and pedestrians, and together as a multimodal system. The analysis resulted in the final recommended improvements discussed in the modal plans in chapters 5 through 8 and reflected in the improvement projects along corridors and at intersections identified in Appendix D. I'm now going to provide a brief overview of each of the modal plans here that are shown on the slide. The street network, or the multimodal streets plan, as discussed in Chapter 5, identifies the future number of lanes and street types that will meet the future travel demand along major corridors in Westminster. This reflects street projects where lanes might be repurposed for improvements such as addition of bike lanes, or projects that recommend street widening with multimodal improvements. Street projects also include intersection improvements, installation of traffic signal technology, and corridor and traffic studies as identified in Appendix D. The transit plan, discussed in Chapter 6, identifies priority corridors that are best suited for improvements such as signal technology and dedicated transit lanes that improve bus transit reliability and safety at intersections and along corridors. The transit plan also recommends corridors best suited for stop and station improvements. This includes passenger amenities such as shelters and benches, as well as improved access and connection infrastructure, also known as first and last mile connections, such as crossings and sidewalks. The bicycle network, discussed in Chapter 7, identifies a network of bicycle facilities such as bike lanes and crossing improvements to be implemented throughout the city. The bicycle network of improvements, shown in detail more in Appendix D, will add 62 miles of new bicycle facilities and 15 miles of bicycle facility upgrades citywide to complement the existing 40 miles of on-street bicycle facilities and 150 miles of trails throughout the city today. And finally, the pedestrian network, discussed in Chapter 8, identifies a network of citywide pedestrian improvement projects, including the addition of sidewalks, side paths, and crossing improvements, focusing on areas with high pedestrian activity or missing pedestrian facilities. Over 100 near-term and future pedestrian improvement projects along key corridors and at intersections are identified in Appendix D. Next slide. And I reference Appendix D now, so I'm going to provide a little bit of an overview of that. In Appendix D, which is called Corridor Profiles and Projects, identifies over 260 near-term and future recommended multimodal transportation improvement projects along key major corridors and at intersections in Westminster. Some of these projects may be even already underway, and most are funded by grants or approved city budget for these ones that are already underway. In addition to the transportation capital improvements, Appendix D also includes recommendations for corridor studies and traffic analysis, as well as safety evaluations at key intersections. I always like to note the importance that studies and analysis, such as the future 72nd Avenue corridor study as identified in the strategic plan, are important as they further evaluate and define improvements along corridors and at intersections, with results used to prepare for next step implementation, including design and construction, and identifying funding resources, including grants. Other corridors not shown in the plan can still benefit from future improvements through the application of technical and guidance toolkits, planning and design industry guidance, as well as those improvements identified in future analysis, planning, and design projects. The improvement and project recommendations shown in Appendix D will also be supported by the actions identified in Chapters 10 and 11, as well as through existing internal and external projects, programs, and processes. Next slide. Two new transportation policies, complete streets and traffic calming and speed mitigation, are introduced in Chapter 10 that will be expanded and integrated into the city's projects and programs. The combination of these two policies will ensure Westminster's transportation system will be planned, designed, built, and maintained to provide safe, connected, and accessible transportation infrastructure for all transportation modes. These policies are not only needed for their direct benefits for the community, but also we're finding that transportation grants are evolving to include elements such as complete streets and Vision Zero safety in their grant application requirements. So going into Chapter 9, this chapter provides an overview of key programs and technology the city, in coordination with partners, should evaluate, expand, or integrate to support Westminster's transportation system and to ensure successful implementation and the ongoing operations and maintenance of transportation improvements. The first topic discussed in Chapter 9 is development of a transportation demand management plan and program, also known as TDM in the industry, and the program's associated strategies for city employees, residents, development, businesses, and visitors. These type of TDM programs, which many cities have today, provide information, encouragement, and incentives to help travelers know about the different types of transportation options available to them. The TDM program, which will support other city initiatives, including the sustainability plan, for example, also encourages the use of transportation options that are lower emission and non-single occupancy modes, resulting in transportation system optimization and reduced environmental impacts. Chapter 9 also includes an overview of the continued expansion of intelligent transportation system technology, also known as ITS, for the traffic signal systems and other technology elements in the transportation system. For example, over the next few years, the city will leverage over $1.2 million in grant funding to implement traffic signal technology citywide to improve the safety and operations along corridors and at intersections. And finally, in Chapter 9, we also introduced evolving transportation technologies that the city should continue evaluating for potential integration into Westminster, including micromobility, also known as scooter and bicycle rentals, as identified in the new strategic plan. This chapter also discusses the exploration of autonomous vehicles, also known as driverless vehicles, like those vehicles that were used to transfer food donations between Growing Home and the MAC last year along near 72nd Avenue corridor. The chapter also identifies the need to evaluate and prepare for other transportation technologies such as automated and connected freight technologies. Next slide, please. To ensure the current and future capital improvements and investments along corridors and at intersections, such as those that I previously discussed, and to ensure these are successfully implemented and maintained, and to also provide a truly comprehensive multimodal transportation system, important implementation, programmatic, and policy strategies and actions have been identified and are presented in the tables in Chapter 10. 11 strategies, as summarized in key themes on the top half of this slide, identify the key focus areas to achieve Westminster's transportation vision and goals. These strategies focus on the 4 transportation mode areas, as well as parking and implementation. Development of the strategies were informed by community, stakeholder, and city staff input, and application of industry best practices, existing plans and projects, and other citywide goals. These strategies are achieved by over 40 near-term and future actions. A number of the key action themes are shown in the bottom half of this slide. Each action listed in Chapter 10 is associated with an implementation initiation timeframe, planning level cost estimate ranges that exclude maintenance and operation costs, action initiation partners, and which plan goals the action addresses. Next slide. And finally, the last chapter in the plan, Chapter 11, is implementation and next steps. This chapter identifies over 35 early actions the city, in coordination with partners, can initiate over the next few years, depending on priorities and resources. A number of these actions include key early tasks to initiate the implementation of new projects and programs, whereas many other early actions may be already underway or will continue to build upon established projects and programs. Some actions will require evaluating the expansion of the city's resources to manage and implement the plan's actions and projects, and a number of actions will require support through partnerships and external funding resources such as grants. Chapter 11 also includes a high-level discussion of the plan implementation, next steps, including development of an implementation plan, identification of funding resources, as well as an introduction of the next steps to track and report on the progress of the plan implementation. Next slide. We are now in the third and final phase of the plan development process, and with the draft plan completed and ready to go out to community outreach beginning next week. And then we look forward to completing the plan later this summer, the final plan. Online community input on the draft plan will begin on June 28th, so a week from yesterday, and will continue to July 19th. The draft plan and appendices will be posted online with an associated survey to gather community input, and the survey will have individual chapter questions as well as opportunities for participants to provide open input. The survey will be available in both English and Spanish. Also during June and July, before the community input closes, the project team will be presenting an overview of the draft plan to other select city boards and commissions. And the project team will also engage with staff from RTD, Dr. Cog, CDOT, and Jefferson and Adams County to discuss the plan's recommendations and those that will require coordination and partnerships with these agencies. Jurisdictions adjacent to Westminster will also be notified about the draft plan, as some of the plan recommendations include opportunities to ensure seamless cross-jurisdictional connections and coordination during project implementation and through other partnership opportunities. After the draft plan and community stakeholder input is gathered and reviewed, revisions will be made to the final plan as needed, and the plan will be prepared and presented to City Council at August 23rd meeting. After the plan is finalized, the transportation engineering and planning team will begin the development of an implementation plan and begin initiating a number of the early actions identified in Chapter 11. Next slide. This concludes the presentation, and thank you for your time. We look forward to receiving your feedback on the draft plan beginning next week through July 19th, and I can follow up with any questions you have, and I'll ask Heath to join me. Thank you.
Thank you, Planner Evanoff. And I guess I should ask Heath, do you have anything further to add?
No, that really summarizes it, and just looking forward to receiving input. If any of the commission has the chance to review and provide input, or just get the word out to get it to our citizens. Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, do the commissioners have any questions or comments? Well, it looks like you did a very good job then, because, oh, we have one.
Hi, Christina. I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed working with the cat, and it's finally nice to see you sort of in person.
Thank you, Commissioner Dunn, and we appreciate your contributions on that committee, and you can see the final product now. And I wanted to add, I apologize, I forgot, I provided a link, I believe it's in your agenda, to Jennifer, that you guys have a direct link to the packet that was given to council last night. So you do have that direct link. So I wanted to mention that so you can see the sneak peek of the plan, and then we'll release it next week. So just wanted to add that.
All right, looks like everyone got information. Oh, we have another one. David.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have a few comments on this, and I do appreciate the work that went into this. But however, I'm not really, I'm really coming out not really in favor of what I'm seeing in here. First off, I really, you started off your presentation, Christina, with shift from vehicle-centric to people-centric. Vehicle-centric is people-centric. People get into their vehicles and they drive at the time they want to a place they want to go. I mean, that is literally people-centric. Right? Forcing people into buses or other forms of transportation is inherently not people-centric. It is a thing of the past. So I really didn't like that that's the intention of the transportation plan. Also, I have very large concerns about including Vision Zero and complete streets to an extent. There's times when it makes sense, times not. But the Vision Zero is just not a good program. I mean, it's based on a fallacy that we can get to zero traffic deaths, which is true. If we're all driving 5 miles an hour, the chances of us having a traffic death is zero, until that one guy on the bicycle decides to go street racing and kills himself. So not one death is allowed. Well, that's a problem. I think that's just a philosophical problem. And while I think we should use good engineering practices to engineer streets of the appropriate speeds, traffic calming, especially the use of speed bumps and other things, are very problematic. So those are some of my general comments. And I also, in the appendices, when in Appendix B, there were actual, what do you call them? Exhibits in there with different areas of population and stuff like that. And I'm questioning some of the data, because you show Westmore Technology Park of having a very low transit usage for their residents. Well, there are no residents. Let's see, B13. I'm trying to apologize, I didn't write that page number down, but that's the posted speed limits. It's going to be, there was an error on the speed limit too. Countryside Drive between Oak Street and 100th is signed at 30 miles an hour, not 25 miles an hour like the graph says. But I really was questioning, where's the transit, yeah. Oh, yep. I also had some questions about the stress for the traffic for bicycling. Just because some areas you're showing Countryside Drive west of Oak there as close interaction with moderate speed multi-lane traffic, and you've got a parking space wide bicycle lane on either side. So I think that's a level of traffic stress one, just from my opinion. But anyhow, I'm just seeing some data that's really doesn't make sense. So I'm sure you're using older forecasts and stuff, but that's just some other things that I noticed. But those are my comments, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. We appreciate the comments, and we'll take a look at the exhibits. And I do agree, there are some older data. A lot of it's pre-pandemic data too, which is challenging, and census data, which kind of rolls things up into larger geographic region. But we'll always take a look at our data. And I always let people know that when we get into project levels, we use the most recent data available to us as well. So I just want to let you know. But thank you for your comments. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other commissioners wish to comment? Let me ask you, planners, can commissioners make further comments on the website you mentioned in your presentation?
Yes, you're welcome. Our emails are there if you want to give us comments. We ask if you could, when it opens on June 28th, there is a survey to complete comments chapter by chapter. We encourage you to go there, but you're always welcome to reach out to us as well to provide feedback. So, yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you for your presentation. It seems there are no more comments, so we will be moving on to the next agenda item. And I believe we have David Gurman to make a presentation here. Your mic is muted, David.
Oh, sorry about that. I'll try that again. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate your introduction. And yes, my name is David Gurman. I'm a senior planner with our planning division. And tonight I will be presenting to you the Knolls at Big Dry Creek project. Boulder Creek Neighborhoods, a developer of a 34.96 acre parcel located at the northwest corner of West 128th Avenue and Huron Street, has made application to the city to approve a preliminary development plan, or PDP, and an official development plan, ODP, for this property. This requested approval is being sought to support the future development of the site with 122 single-family attached homes to be known as the Knolls at Big Dry Creek. Tonight, the applicant is seeking your recommendation of approval to the City Council of both their PDP and ODP documents. As a part of bringing this project before you, a staff agenda memo has been created, and tonight's public hearing has been properly noticed. The agenda memo, its associated attachments, tonight's PowerPoint presentation, and the public notices mailed, posted, and published in the Westminster window are hereby entered into the public record at this time. Here's a map of the area under consideration. You can see that this property is adjacent to two other residential subdivisions of similar density and is supported by an existing street network. The Big Dry Creek open space abuts this site to the north and to the west. You may notice that the open space boundaries and the project boundaries appear to overlap in various locations along the northern and western boundaries of the site. This is due to unclarity as to where the boundaries lie in these locations and will be resolved and cleaned up such that the boundaries are clear and whole with an upcoming application before the City Council. We can answer any questions that you may have about the situation at the conclusion of this presentation. I will now provide you with a brief overview of the criteria used by staff to evaluate the PDP and ODP for this site. Section 11.5.14 of the Westminster Municipal Code contains 10 criteria that are to be the basis of consideration for approval of PDP documents. Staff finds that the PDP application generally meets these criteria as outlined in the agenda memo. The first four criteria, which you see here on your screen, are that the PDP is in conformance with applicable codes, follows appropriate planning principles, identifies any exceptions sought by the applicant, and that the PDP is compatible with surrounding development. Criteria 5 through 7 ensure that the project does not adversely affect and is not adversely affected by surrounding development, and that travel to and from the intended project site is safely established. The final three criteria ensure that the project may meet any land dedications that may be needed to facilitate its development, that a corresponding ODP will be able to meet the criteria of the PDP, and that the applicant does not have any outstanding obligations to the City of Westminster. In the next part of staff's analysis covered, the next part of staff's analysis covered the ODP for this project. Section 11.5.15 of the Westminster Municipal Code contains 17 criteria that are to be the basis of consideration for approval for ODPs. Staff finds that the ODP application generally meets these criteria as outlined in the agenda memo. You may notice very similar language between many of the ODP criteria and the previously introduced PDP criteria. The first 5 ODP criteria, for example, closely mirror the first 4 PDP criteria, those being that the ODP is in conformance with applicable codes, follows appropriate planning principles, identifies any exceptions sought, and that it is compatible with surrounding development. One other criterion that's introduced is that the ODP must also be compatible with the PDP. Criteria 6 through 10 ensure that the project does not adversely affect and is not adversely affected by surrounding development. Additionally, physical attributes of buildings, including height, wall, setbacks, materials, and architecture, are discussed. Criteria 11 through 14 address more of the physical elements of design proposed for the project, including fencing, walls, and landscaping. Also discussed are vehicular circulation and access, parking, and ensuring minimum hazards for vehicles and pedestrians within and around the site. The final 3 criteria focus on additional pedestrian standards, adequacy of utilities and storm facilities to serve the proposed development, and, as with the PDP, that the applicant does not have any outstanding obligations to the city. On this slide, you see the staff recommendation, and that is to hold tonight's public hearing, to review the proposed PDP and ODP, and that the Planning Commission recommend approval of these 2 documents to City Council, with the finding that they are generally meeting all of the criteria set forth in sections 11.5.14 and 11.5.15 of the Westminster Municipal Code, respectively. Staff believes that this project and its associated PDP and ODP support the 4 strategic plan goals newly adopted by City Council. A beautiful, desirable, safe, and environmentally responsible city is fostered by the project, which acknowledges the natural topography of the site, keeps structures to 1 story to protect view sheds, and embraces views of both the Big Dry Creek open space and the Front Range. A resilient economy is reinforced with the approval of the proposed project, as it allows for the development of a new neighborhood, which will in turn provide new housing and diverse economic opportunities. The city's strategic plan goal to provide visionary, effective, and collaborative government is met by approving the proposed PDP and ODP as the project meets the Westminster Municipal Code and other applicable requirements. The project also includes land dedications and mechanisms to further protect, expand, and enhance the open space area and provide more access to it, supporting a sustainable environment that meets the needs of current and future residents. The applicant is with us tonight and has a presentation to share with you as well. I thank you for your attention. There are several staff members with us this evening, and we will all jointly be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Can everybody hear me?
Before you start, Mr. Cooper, Mr. Chairman, do you want Mr. Cooper to go ahead with his presentation, or do you want to have any questions first?
I have no questions, and I'll ask real quickly if any commissioners have any questions. But I think probably having the presentation immediately would be the best. But let me check. Do any commissioners have any questions?
Okay, I'm going to disappear and let Mike have the floor here.
Right. I think Mr. Cooper, you can proceed.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Mike Cooper with Boulder Creek Neighborhoods. Our office address is 712 Main Street, Louisville, Colorado, 80027. I want to thank you for considering our proposal tonight for the Knolls at Big Dry Creek, a senior targeted active adult community. I just want to send out thanks to Dave Gurman and city staff for working with us diligently over the past year and a half. It's been a real pleasure working with them. We've had numerous challenges to work through, but at the end of the day, we really work together to come up with a better project and better solution. So we really appreciate working with city staff. We have our consultant team in attendance tonight to field any technical questions on traffic, civil engineering, or planning landscape architecture. To introduce you to Boulder Creek Neighborhoods, we are primarily an active adult, low maintenance home builder. We've been building for the past 15 years along the Northern Front Range. We are unique in that we are the only exclusive low maintenance home builder on the Front Range. And we're also unique in that we seek to serve underserved demographics of primarily seniors, active adults, as well as downsizers and downshifters. We offer unique home plans that are really in low supply in this marketplace. So we're excited for this offering in the city of Westminster. Just as a little history, we did have a neighborhood meeting. It was a long time ago. It was in January of 2020. We had about 6 neighbors in attendance. Back then it was pre-COVID, and we were meeting in person. Some questions that came up were the product and lot sizes, the improvements that would be happening on 128th Avenue and timing about that, and lighting and open space and wildlife and water and sewer capacity. So getting into the presentation, Dave, if you could advance to the next slide, please. I have control. Thank you. So the product that we're proposing for the Knolls is a for sale paired patio home. This is a senior targeted product with main level living. It's a very attractive product with rich elevations on all sides of the homes. And it's a home series with the rear elevations are really just as nice as the front elevations in terms of architectural detail. The Knolls will be a low maintenance community, as I mentioned, and a low maintenance home. The HOA will maintain all of the grounds in the community, including the on-lot landscaping. A really nice feature of this product is that while they are paired homes, they really read as one larger home, as each paired home building has one side load garage and one front load garage. So it really looks kind of like a larger house instead of a paired home. Next slide, please. There's going to be a lot of architectural diversity in this community. We're going to have 7 plans to offer and 9 color schemes. As you can see here, there's a lot of facade and roofline articulation and detail in both the front, sides, and rears of the homes. Next slide, please. There's 2 series of what we call the Opportunities paired patio homes, Opportunities 1 and 2. They are different floor plans offered in these 2 series and different square footages, but architecturally, as you can see here, they're very compatible. Next slide. The Opportunities 1 series consists of 3 different floor plans with distinct elevation styles. These plans range from about 1,700 square feet on the main level to a total of 3,200 square feet if you include the up to 2 additional bedrooms in a finished garden or walkout lower level. These homes are generally planned to be in the areas backing to the Big Dry Creek open space and generally on the south side of the internal park. Next slide. The Opportunities 2 series features 2 different floor plans and distinct elevation styles as well. These homes are offered at a more attainable price point. They have optional basements, including gardens and walkouts as well. And they range from about 1,250 square feet to 2,000 square feet, depending if they have a basement or not. These homes are planned in the areas backing to 128th Ave and Huron Street, generally speaking, and along the north side of the internal park. Next slide. All of these homes feature really large functional outdoor living spaces, both covered and uncovered. That's really the hallmark feature of these homes is the outdoor living. The rear porches on some of these larger floor plans are anywhere from 250 to 350 square feet, with total outdoor living space around 500 to 600 square feet. Next slide. These homes live off the backs of the house, and as a result, we intentionally laid out the site so that the homes do not back up to each other, so that the HOA maintained common areas are essentially the yard space for these homes. Next slide. When we first looked at this site, what really drew us to it was the proximity to the open space. The number one amenity for this active adult buyer demographic is walking trails. All the green area on this context map is the Big Dry Creek open space, which our community will tie into in terms of a trail connection. Next slide. To introduce you to the site plan of the neighborhood, we are proposing 2 access points, one off of Huron Street and one off of 128th Avenue. The site has a lot of topography that goes from 128th Avenue, which is on the bottom of the plan, to the creek, which is on the top of the plan. I think it goes down probably 30, 40, or 50 feet or so from 128th Ave down. So this product really works with the topography. As I mentioned, there's two rows of kind of walkout basements that help to terrace down the site. The central park area takes up a little bit of grade, and you'll see really, as you'll see through these images, it really fits seamlessly into a very challenging site to contend with the topography. Generally speaking, we have masonry privacy walls along Huron Street and 128th Avenue. The homes along 128th Avenue are kind of below grade, I'll say. They're the tops of the roofs are generally below the level of the elevation of 128th Avenue. So as you drive to the west on 128th, you'll kind of see over the community and still maintain views of the open space and the mountains beyond. Next slide, please. In terms of open space, there's been a previous land dedication of 11.6 acres, as you see in orange here, that was dedicated a while back in, I believe, the 90s, early 2000s, to allow for the trail and open space along Big Dry Creek, which is kind of running through the bottom of that orange area. This proposal dedicates another 8.2 acres. So in total, nearly 20 acres of open space will be dedicated by this parcel of land to the Big Dry Creek open space. Next slide. The blue line is the existing regional trail on this plan. Our proposed trails that we will be constructing are shown in yellow, with the exception of the line along Huron Street, which is an existing trail, which we will maintain. But the remaining of the yellow trails it's a better part of a mile of trails that we're making this loop trail system, kind of go through the community and along 128th Avenue and then tie into the blue trail there, which is the existing regional trail. So all in all, I mean, as I mentioned before, the looped walking trail systems is really what this older demographic is seeking in these communities. And as you see here, this will provide probably about a mile and a half or 2 miles of of a looped walking trail system when it's all connected. So we're very excited about the open space and the trails and how it's all come together, and we'll get into a little more detail on that here coming up. Next slide. This is a context map to kind of give you an idea of where these cross sections are shown on the site plan. As you can see, A and B on the bottom there are going to show a couple cross sections through along 128th Avenue to kind of show how the homes and the trail are sited and designed in relation to that arterial street, 128th Avenue. If you can, and then C, the section C will be going through a park, and there's a subsequent slide that will kind of show that park area there. So Dave, if you could advance to the next slide, please. So with all the topographies I mentioned across the site, we really took advantage of lowering the homes and peeling off the trail that would typically run directly along 128th Ave, along that arterial street, which is on the top left. And we made it more of a meandering park-like trail, dropping below the grade of that arterial street. As you can see here, the homes will generally not be visible from the traveling public on 128th Avenue, at least the homes that are abutting that street. This is kind of depicting the most extreme condition of how the homes are below that elevation of the street. Next slide. And this section is closer to the intersection of 128th and Huron. So you can see the homes will still be significantly lower than 128th Avenue. Next slide. And here's a visual of that, kind of the last cross section there that shows the landscape buffer on the left and that grade differential between 128th Avenue on the left and the homes down on the right. This allows the traveling public to still have mountain views over the neighborhood and provides a more desirable pedestrian experience peeling the trail off of the street. Next slide. This is just a view of the neighborhood from the intersection of 128th and Huron, showing the entry sign at the corner and the general lower elevation of the homes in relation to 128th Ave, which is on the left. Next slide. For parks and amenities, we created that central park space that runs east-west through the site in response to existing topography. The two yellow stars are major park amenities, and the orange and red stars are more casual gathering areas that include comfortable seating and tables in some areas, overlook areas with benches, and some reading gardening areas that provide, just generally comfortable areas to socialize, relax, and enjoy mountain park and open space views. So we really paid a lot of attention to the details in these areas to take advantage of good views to the open space and the mountains, etc. Next slide. The East Amenity area that consists of pickleball courts, adjacent shaded seating and plaza areas with picnic tables, and kind of a great lawn area to the west is depicted here. If you advance the next slide, it gives a view kind of looking over this great lawn area. And this picture just kind of shows, looking west over the great lawn, you can see the homes on the left, hopefully being afforded views over those homes on the right to the extent possible. And if you go to the next slide, you can see a cross section of that, Dave. Hopefully we're trying to site these homes sensitively to relate to the park and also to capture these northern and western views. So we're pretty excited how this community has been laid out. Next slide. This is a plan view of the West Amenity area, just to the south of that northern local street in the community. Next slide. This area consists of a park shelter, a bocce court, a covered outdoor kitchen area and dining area, and plaza areas with picnic tables. We also integrated the mailboxes into the masonry elements of this shelter, kind of closest to the street there where you see the cars, to integrate the mailboxes into this social space. There's also an area with chairs and tables to play cards and socialize, kind of on the left of that bocce area. So this was kind of the dining and relaxation area as opposed to the other areas, more of the active amenity area. Next slide. And this is a slide of the main park area looking back to the east over that great lawn. An example of some of these reading garden areas that we have sprinkled throughout the site, as I showed on a previous slide. And advance, Dave. And that concludes all of the site plan and site features and amenities. Just wanted to touch briefly upon the comp plan conformance. I know Dave mentioned this in his report, so I won't go into too much detail, but generally the original PDP was approved back in 1988 and proposed various commercial and multifamily components. That PDP is technically expired now. Our PDP proposes single-family attached housing in keeping with the existing comp plan designation of R3.5, which allows for 3.5 homes per acre. Next slide. The proposed citywide comp plan, which is ongoing and nearly complete as I understand it, updates this site to be a proposed low-density residential, which is pretty similar to the current R3.5 designation, which we conform to. And advance. And this slide zooms in a little bit on the current comp plan and shows our land use designation in yellow, which is R3.5, in relation to the surroundings. And as you see, it's really all residential R3.5 in the immediate vicinity of this site. So our proposal is in keeping with the surrounding character and land uses. And next slide. And that's concluding my presentation. I thank you for your time tonight. This slide just highlights some of the benefits this neighborhood will bring to the city of Westminster. As I mentioned, it's a low maintenance community for senior and active adults with main floor living. It's a for sale product for an underserved senior demographic. It offers a variety of home sizes and price points. The paired patio homes with garden and walkout levels respond to the topography on the site and is really the best type of residential housing to offer on this property. Open space dedications are well in excess of that required, with trail connections through and around the neighborhood and that connect to the Big Dry Creek Trail network. So we're very excited to bring this community to the city of Westminster. We hope you feel the same way. And myself and our team are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. And at this time, I would like to ask if there are any commissioners who have questions or comments. You can ask either staff or the applicant. Tracy.
How are you?
Good.
I do have a few comments and a few questions. So in general, I think it's a very impressive site plan. I think it is an underserved market in Westminster. I know it's one of the goals to provide more senior living. And I think this empty nester kind of product is exactly what Westminster needs. I do have a couple questions though. One of them, there was a comment in the landscape section that talked about reclaimed water was going to be used for landscaping. I think that's great. I think that's something that Westminster, I don't think they require it, but I know that they encourage it. So I think that's wonderful. I do know that that usually means a higher salt content in the water. And so plants have to, you have to select plants accordingly. The plant list on this thing was amazing, how many different varieties of plants. I just want to make sure they're picking the right things that will do well with that kind of water. So I would like to just make sure somebody's double checking that. I'm sure our landscape architect, city landscape architect has checked it, but it would be good just to double check that. The other thing is I've ridden that Dry Creek Trail many times on my bicycle. And when you get close to that, that treatment facility, there's a wastewater treatment facility. It doesn't smell too great. And this isn't so much for Mr. Cooper, but this is more for, I don't know if we have anybody here from Public Works. Is there a reason why? I could just see that be a problem because there's a lot of new housing going in there. And that smell is pretty bad. So is there any reason for that? Do we know why that happens? Anybody? I'll put that out there. You can answer me later on that.
Well, I know why it happens, but I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking.
I don't know if it's supposed to be like that. I would sure like them to find a way to solve that because I think that could be problematic for the people in the area. Let's see. The other thing I wanted to comment on was the just the architecture, having four-sided architecture. When I first was looking at this plan, I was looking at the exceptions that were being requested for the reduced setbacks. You know, and I kind of always get uncomfortable when I see that, but I understand it's an empty nester product so that you're wanting to reduce your yard size because it is low maintenance, and I get that. But the four-sided architecture, having really nice architecture, even on the sides, really makes that more palatable to me to think that having reduced setbacks, if you have nice architecture, really makes a difference. And then having nice architecture on the backs of those homes along Dry Creek is really nice. And you rarely see any stone on the back of homes. So I think that's really nice. It looks like you guys do a really good job. So I have to commend you on that. One of the cross sections that you showed the relationship to 128th and those homes that kind of back onto 128th. It looks like you did a really great job by pushing those homes down. So maybe even along the road, you might even have mountain views over the top. So you're not blocking the road, you know, with homes on that side. Because when I first looked at the site plan, the homes are kind of lined up along 128th, and I kind of thought, gosh, it would have been nice if they could have gotten some more articulation in there. But the fact that it's pushed down so far, yeah, thank you, people at site plan. You go to the site, or you go to site plan too. The site plan shows those homes just lined up along 128th down there, and they're just so straight. But the fact that they're pushed down and that you won't see that because of the grade change, I think that was done really well. And I have to commend you on that as well. And then back to that site plan, the only other thing I would say on that site plan, the westernmost prepared home that backs onto 128th, I think you're asking for a reduced setback on that to the arterial street to 128th of 40 foot. Is it that one? Yeah, he's nodding. So I'm just wondering, is that the only one that has that 40-foot setback?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it just seems like you're squeezing that in there, and your site plan and your entry would be so much nicer if you didn't have that one parent home. And I know it's two more houses to sell, but I just think that that's pushing the envelope a little on that. That's the only one. That's the only thing I didn't see that I really didn't like on that. I know you guys are pretty far down the path on this, but everything else is great. I'm just really impressed by this. I think it's going to be a great project. And my last couple of questions just have to do with if you are moving through this process, when do you anticipate to start construction, and what is your price point?
Great question. Timing wise, we still have to plat the property if we are approved on our ODP and PDP. So that's generally a several month process to get that completed. So hopefully in the late fall, probably getting going on land development. And probably finishing up and going vertical next spring, summer, generally speaking, and hopefully a three-year build out roughly on this many homes.
And I'll also add, Ms. Calling, that the city council meeting is currently scheduled for July 26th.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry, what was your other question?
Price point.
Price point. Yeah, I try to avoid that one if I can. So motivated forgetting. So generally, we have a wide variety of options. So it could be the homes, if they don't choose a basement option, and it's just a 1,500 square foot home roughly. It's probably in the starting in the high fours or something around there. And then by the time you some of the homes that back up to the open space and they have a finished walkout basement and they have great views of the open space. It could be, anywhere of, 600,000 and up from there, generally speaking. So that's approximate. I mean, that's kind of thinking through it today. So take it with a grain of salt, but generally that high 4s, 5 to up to 6s, probably something like that.
I expect it will do very well in this market because I definitely think it's an underserved market. And I just have to comment on one of your comments. I've heard people that downsize. I've never heard the term downshifters. Is that a new term? That's kind of interesting. But
yeah, because we don't like to really call ourselves a senior home builder. We really focus on the lifestyle component of it. And a lot of our products we think are appealing to older demographics, but sometimes it's not necessarily. It's a couple that just want to have a lock and leave house. They don't want any yard to maintain, and they just want something they can leave at any time and go travel and just do other things other than yard work and maintain their house. So that's kind of why we always call ourselves a low maintenance home builder. That's why all of our communities have that commonality to them, whether they're cottage homes or ranch patio homes. That's kind of the distinction that we like to focus on. Is it's kind of a psychographic versus a demographic, which is people who just want that kind of low maintenance product and community. So
I suspect you've done really well in your other communities. It's this product we've built this in several other communities. So we're at a point where we fine-tuned our floor plans a lot. And so we're pretty excited. What we bring forward to Westminster is going to be a really great versions of these plans for sure. Oh, good job. I support the project. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Colley. And Commissioner McConnell, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Chairman Boschert. Commissioner Collins stole my thunder on almost every setback question I had, but thanks for the clarification. I was wondering which ones were lots 1 and 2, and now I know those are on the southwest corner of the development. And I'm guessing that 41 through 52 and lot 90 are those along the eastern boundary and the furthest northeast corner. Okay. Question I do have though is, given that there's a request to decrease the setbacks, how is that going to compare to what we have at Tanglewood and the home farm setbacks from right away?
I can go ahead and jump in here on that one. Generally speaking, the setbacks are very comparable. Both developments feature quite a bit of separation from the roadways. And we tried to create, working with Mike, and he's already pointed out the if you will, the depressed layer or strata of the homes. In addition to that, with the addition of the sound wall, the meandering trail, and the landscape buffers, they're going to have a very similar feel as you're moving around through that intersection. The wall is a common theme, and as well as the spacing, and you can kind of see on the slide that we have up there some of the separation that is achieved as well. So I think they'll be very comparable, and yet they'll be different enough that you won't feel like it's just a cookie cutter scenario either.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't so much worried about a cookie cutter scenario as I was a dramatic difference between what is currently here and what will be there with this development. And by the way, in the interest of full disclosure, I've lived in home farm for 27 years. Give or take a month or two.
Yes, because Tanglewood kind of sits up, and there's a big buffer on Huron, and this community's kind of sunk down. So they must have put Huron Street right in the middle of the grade between these two sites on a hillside, I presume. Mm-hmm. So along Huron Street, it's the homes are more at grade, and that's where we have a sound wall will actually be effective along Huron because it's a one-level home, and the sound wall will be at the grade of the home and offer pretty good sound protection and privacy. And then along 128th, as I showed you, the homes are sunk down. We debated, working with Dave and his crew, whether we wanted to put the trail and the sound wall up on the top, right next to the street, or do we want to pull it down? And is the wall more effective, as you pull the wall down near the homes? We did a sound analysis on it, and it didn't really make a difference whether we put the wall down low or up high. From an acoustic perspective, it was the same. So then we just looked at the design of it and how could we make it the nicest kind of trail system that we could have through there. And, it's not very comfortable walking along a busy arterial street. So we decided to kind of peel it down in a way, and then bring that wall down closer to the home so that there's kind of a 50-foot buffer behind those homes up to that wall, to give them some privacy from that trail, even though they might kind of see over it a little bit. But we really didn't want to bring that trail behind the houses just from a safety and security standpoint. We liked having that wall in between the homes and the trail. So that's kind of where we landed. So they were pretty excited with how it turned out.
Yeah, I know that one of the home farm resident concerns was that sound wall reflecting noise back to the home farm development, making it noisier there than occurred. Although I don't know with Huron right behind it and 128th right behind some of those houses, how it could be noisier. But I do believe where in this cross section where that sound wall is located, any sound reflecting back to the south is going to be minimal, if non-existent.
Yeah, and that's what our study showed, was that wherever we put it, the sound is going to go over the site due to the topography. And
right.
It really was fine. There wasn't any noise issues with at the homes themselves. Okay. So yeah, we have enough of a buffer there. So
okay, thank you, Mr. Cooper. That's all I have, Jim.
Thank you, Commissioner McConnell. And Commissioner Tomachek, did you have a comment?
Yes, I had a few questions I wanted to ask. First two are actually to the city. A couple of the commenters from the public indicated that this particular parcel of land may have some either farm or industrial contamination to it. Is there any indication that that's true?
Well, I will. I'll let Mike add to what I'm going to provide here. They did do an environmental study as part of their initial submittal. It did not show anything, of concern. And then as part of their civil drawings, when we get to that stage, and that's down the road a bit, that will be explored in more detail as well, because obviously anything like that, if it is found, would have to be mitigated. So.
Okay. And several of the commenters also indicated that there's a lot of traffic out that part of the world already, and that this is just going to add to it. As I know, the transportation plan doesn't get down into really deep details of what might happen at this intersection, but are current plans going to support the concerns that they've raised, meaning a widening of 128, widening of Huron traffic signal, etc.?
Thank you, Commissioner Tomachek. I think those are very valid questions, and I see Heath has joined us. I'm going to let the experts speak here, because I would just be, trying to wing it, and we have an expert. So let's go ahead and turn it over to him.
Thank you, Commissioner Tomachek. Heath Klein, City Transportation Engineer. So that is a great question, and it is often kind of the concern of new development is the additional traffic. As we've seen in the traffic report, which still needs a little bit over a 24-hour period generated by this site, but where we really feel the rub is during those peak hours. And this site is going to generate in the evening about 120 peak hour trips. It's actually a little bit less. But if you think about that, you're adjacent to two arterials. So take the 120 trips in 1 hour, and that's one additional vehicle to Huron and essentially one additional vehicle to 128th in a minute during that 5 to 6 p.m. hour. So the volumes on and the arterials, they can actually absorb that fairly well. Currently, we're seeing about 17,000 vehicles on 128th during a day, and we're seeing 18,000 vehicles on Huron during the day. What that shows is we have about 1,600 vehicles in the peak hour existing. So, and that's for 128th. And we're showing about 1,700 vehicles in a peak hour traveling on Huron. So by adding, if you take like 60 and add, to 128th and then 60 and add it to Huron, we're able to absorb that quite well without a big notice.
Okay.
And to further that, this, as Mr. Cooper has shown, the project will be fully improving 128th from Huron to their west end, to the Home Farm Lane intersection. So we're going to have the 5-lane cross section plus the right turn lane into their site along 128th. But in addition to that, the city is placing a project request in our 5-year CIP to upgrade 128th from Zunai to Home Farm or all the way over to Huron if this project were to move forward. And what that project CIP request is going to do is to turn 128th into the 5-lane arterial that it is scheduled to be, but that requires an improvement of the Big Dry Creek Bridge. So it's going to be a pretty pricey project to do, but we're getting to that point where we needed to have 2 lanes in each direction along this portion of the roadway. And so we are moving forward to start to secure that funding.
And that work would be done regardless of whether or not this development.
Correct. Yes. And in the city of Westminster, we require the developer to improve the property frontage of the property that they are developing, but we don't have like a rational nexus to make a development improve all of 128th to Zunai. That there's just not that written up in our code. So we are unable to do that.
Okay. And then the last concern that the public seemed to have was with wildlife on the area. Certain kinds of birds of prey, I understand, will go elsewhere, are not endangered, et cetera, et cetera. Bald eagles have special protections. Is there a mitigation plan on the assumption that there are, in fact, nests in that area?
Mr. Cooper did recently turn in a study of the environmental situation at the site. No nests were found in that study. And so what they were asked to do is just to be cautious when, as far as the timing of different activities on the site so that you don't disturb any nests that might show up. And also to be conscious of the hunting and migratory seasons as well. But generally speaking, the environmental study does confirm the assertion that the impact to wildlife will be relatively minor, with the exception of the prairie dogs that would have to be relocated or removed from that site. The birds of prey and all of the wildlife, of course, are attracted by the creek. And one of the things that we want to really focus on here is the greatly increased amount of open space that we are gaining and being able to protect so that we are, over time, being able to shift to that habitat.
Okay. Building on that a little bit, this one's for Mr. Cooper. It seemed to say in your development plan that there are going to be no fences between the yards. There are going to be separation fences to the open space. And the reason I ask this is because living adjacent to Legacy Ridge, folks moved into that development and then immediately began to complain that they had coyotes and foxes in their backyards chasing their own dogs. And I'm wondering how that gets dealt with in this development.
Yeah, so the fencing you're referring to is required by the city's open space department to, line the delineate the public versus private land area. So that's kind of a standard practice. You know, with that fence, you're likely to put some chicken wire on it or something that probably isn't going to stop a coyote if a coyote wants to get over an open rail fence, I'm guessing. I haven't witnessed it, but I've heard lots of stories about dogs being taken. The one thing, and so you make a very valid point. I absolutely concur that, yeah, we don't have fencing that will necessarily stop wildlife from migrating into this community. But we don't have fenced yards, and so at least dogs won't be routinely kept outside, in a backyard, which I think is most of the time when dogs are taken, they're by themselves, they will not be walked. So generally, our CCNRs will not allow for, pets to be left outside because there's no fencing. So I don't want to say that takes care of itself, but I think that is better than having a fenced-in backyard with just an open rail fence and people are letting their dogs roam and remain outside for long periods of time.
Okay. And then my last question relates to the sizing of the roads and the layouts of them. My experience watching Bradford Village and the Legacy Ridge developments is that the intent was to build it for older, perhaps a little wealthier resident, but because of the way certain jobs pay, younger folks moved in and wealthier older folks than you thought would move in. Both of those groups tend to bring their toys with them. And that gets into bigger questions of assumptions about there only being 1.5 to 2 vehicles in any home or the size of the vehicles that might be there. The reason I ask that is not so much they're going to park their motorhomes around and all that, because your HOA deals with those kinds of things. My question is about on-street parking and access by large vehicles like trash trucks and emergency vehicles, and whether or not those things have been taken into account.
Yeah, the street section that we're using is an approved, local street section in the city. So we have not deviated from any kind of street standards. It's a public street, and I believe it's a 34-foot flow line to flow line roughly street. So adequate parking, and just like on any other street around this community, I believe it would be similar street section.
Okay, so you're not going for any walkable neighborhood kind of narrow roadways or traffic calming devices or any of that kind of thing?
No.
Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Tomachek. And now, Commissioner McConnell.
Here we go. Thank you, Chairman Boschert. So Commissioner Tomachek addressed some of the traffic questions and comments I had. And Heath, the question for you would be about having a lighted intersection at 128th and Home Farm Lane. When is that scheduled to happen in the development schedule?
So thank you, Commissioner McConnell. Good question. So right now, when we preliminarily looked at this, the traffic signal warrants based on projections does not meet a warrant to install a signal up at the initial phase of this. What the development will be doing is providing for a pedestrian crossing with the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So the pedestrian activated buttons that will flash to slow traffic down to yield to those pedestrians to cross. But what we're also working with Mr. Cooper on is to have a design for a future traffic signal. And actually we're evaluating the development placing in the conduits for a future traffic signal. So at the time of development, we do not believe that a traffic signal is warranted, but we are anticipated with the volumes increasing, and really part of this, the drive for the city to evaluate the traffic signal is for pedestrian safety. And so if we do find that there is a lot of users from Home Farm or from other communities that come and cross at this intersection, we will move the installation of that signal up. So again, not at the first development, but we are keeping our eyes on it. And as soon as it is warranted, we will be placing a signal there.
Yeah, well, I think the walkers would be well served to know that they can make the connection to the existing trail through their neighborhood and not cross 128th, because I can tell you, I mean, it's kind of a unique situation because when you're going west on 128th, you're going down from 2 lanes and a merge lane at Huron down to 2 and subsequently down to 1. And of course, nobody likes to be second to that last merge point.
Correct. So, and that is something, you know, with this development, we may evaluate, you know, making that shift to 1 lane further east. So that way, you know, if there is that kind of decision point to try to race to get ahead of everybody, it's not happening at that intersection. But you being familiar with this intersection, one of the things that with the 5-lane cross section that's going to happen currently, the south half of 120th is prepared for a 5-lane section. So in a way, if you currently turn left and go westbound on 128th, you almost have a waiting pocket or an acceleration lane for that left turn. And that is going to become the eastbound left turn into this development. So for Home Farm Lane residents, you will, once this gets improved, you will have to make that left turn and get right into the westbound actual lane. So you won't have that kind of acceleration lane. So that will impact that as well. So that is one of the reasons why, again, we will continue to watch that and see whether or not something is happening and it's becoming dangerous, and we'll look for a traffic signal.
Yeah, and so one last thing I would add there is then that going eastbound on 128th, it's the exact opposite situation, right? It's been narrowed down to 1 lane. They go by Big Dry Creek Park. It's still 1 lane. And as soon as it opens up to 2, people decide they've got to make up for lost time. And there's nobody that goes 40 miles an hour up that hill. I guarantee it. Well, I do.
Correct. Yes. Commissioner Connell, be the parade marshal, please. I encourage all of staff and all of our residents to try their best to always abide by.
One last question. Did you share this the information about the widening and improvement project on 128th with some of the residents of Home Farm?
I have spoken to Ms. Carlson about her concerns along the corridor and the safety and not having really a connected sidewalk from Zuni to Home Farm. And so we have explained, I've spoken to her, but I have not provided a lot of information to the rest of the Home Farm residents.
Okay, all right. Thanks for that. That's all I had, Chairman Bosher. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner McConnell. And I actually have a question myself about the land dedication bordering the northern edge of this development. Is that going to be a permanent open space owned by the city? I guess that's for you, David.
Yes.
I was muted. I apologize. I'm trying to keep my mic off whenever I'm not speaking so I can try and reduce the static for everyone. Yes, all of the land dedications will be part of the Big Dry Creek open space in perpetuity.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other commissioners with questions or comments? Okay, I see there doesn't seem to be any. So at this time, I would like to go ahead and open the public testimony. Oh, Commissioner Colleen.
No, I'm good.
No?
Sorry.
Okay. I'd like to open the public testimony portion of this evening's hearing. And voicemails and emails were received by the city and have been read or played during the live meeting. Anyone who wished to speak during this meeting has been asked to sign up in advance. And I would ask Jennifer at this time, has there been anyone who has signed up?
We do not have any requests to speak, Chair Boschert.
Okay. In that case, everyone has had a chance to see all the emails that have been received. And since we have no voicemails, there's nothing to hear there. So I will, at this time, close the public testimony portion and ask any commissioners if they have further questions. Commissioner Calling.
I would like to make a motion. Is it too early to do that?
No, this would be a perfect time.
Okay. I would like to move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve the Preliminary Development Plan, PDP, and Official Development Plan for the Huron Plaza subdivision.
Okay, can we get a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Tomacek got in first. All right, we have a motion before us. Is there any discussion? I will say real quickly that I believe this is a good project. It would be wonderful if the city could buy this land and make it into open space, but it was never considered that in the land use plan. And I think this is a nice development that takes into account the landscape, and it's fairly low impact. So I support this project.
And I would just like to repeat what I
Commissioner
said.
Colley.
I would like to repeat what I said, that I think it's a great project as well. And I welcome it to Westminster, and I hope them lots of success. Boulder Creek Neighborhoods looks like a really great developer. Is it a builder? You guys are builders too. I think that it'll be very successful here in Westminster. Welcome.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Boschert.
I'm in favor.
Chair Boschert is in favor. Vice Chair McConnell.
I'm in favor.
Vice Chair McConnell is in favor. Commissioner Carpenter.
Yes.
Commissioner Carpenter is in favor. Commissioner Calling.
Yes, I'm in favor.
Commissioner Calling is in favor. Commissioner Dunn.
Yes.
Commissioner Dunn is in favor. Commissioner Tomacek.
I'm in favor.
Commissioner Tomacek is in favor. Commissioner Mayo.
I'm in favor.
Commissioner Mayo is in favor. Vote is complete.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. And thank you for the great presentation.
All right.
Do we have any old? Oh, go ahead, Mr. Gurman.
I just said thank you, sir. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Do we have any old business or miscellaneous business? Jennifer, when is the next meeting?
Sorry, I had to look at my calendar. I don't have anything scheduled moving forward. If we don't come up with any items, I will get a training presentation together for you guys. Maybe looking towards July 20th, if I don't have a agenda item.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thanks to everyone, including staff, for a wonderful meeting, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank
Good
you.
night.